Welcome to Hiring Happy Humans, where we talk about all things HR with a variety of folks, from CEOs to community partners, sharing up-to-date trends, best practices, and our wild workplace stories. Each interview is designed to leave you with the knowledge to keep your sanity. I'm your host, Dawn Sipley of Sipley the Best. Thanks for joining in, and let's jump into this week's episode. Welcome back, everybody, to Hiring Happy Humans. I am just so excited to have Becky Stickley on today. She has been working with entrepreneurs for many years now in a wide variety of capacities. And so she's going to be sharing a little bit with us about her journey through entrepreneurship and as a consultant, and how walking alongside of these individuals has really impacted her business. Welcome, Becky. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So share with our audience just a little bit about who you are and how you serve through your consulting company.
Sure. So I like to joke that before I was an entrepreneur, I was an intrapreneur. I did a lot of work. I didn't have a career ladder. I really played in the career jungle gym. I was a children's librarian. I worked in intellectual property law. And then I went to an association where I spent the bulk of my career doing, a lot of different roles. And it was during that time, I got kind of voluntold for a job that really was an opportunity of a lifetime. I did not see it that way at the time. And it was really hard. It was a hard role, doing really important work, but it was really difficult. And that's when I found coaching, because I knew I needed some assistance. What I was hearing from my supervisors is not what I was feeling internally. And so coaching really changed so much for me. I stayed at the association, went on to kind of my dream job there. And through that time, I was like, I think I want to become a coach. Like, that helped me so much. And so I went and got a coaching certification, and I actually used it internally for a while. I would help coach new managers, people who were going to be managing remotely. We didn't know at the time we were all going to go remote eventually. And then I started taking on some one-on-one clients on the side. And about 2.5 years ago, I decided to take the leap, left the association on good terms. It was hard to do because I did love it, loved the work I was doing, but was ready to really go all in on this coaching. And so now I do speaking. I coach one-on-one entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. And then I also have a group program where I combine training and coaching.
Okay. So explain to me this intrapreneur thing, because here at Simply the Best, we do a lot of mental health and self-awareness training. So it sounds like it might be somewhere along the lines of that, but share with us what that term means to you.
Sure. Absolutely. So for me, being a good employee was great for decades. You did what you were supposed to do. There were playbooks we all went by. And over the last few years, those playbooks don't work anymore. Being a good employee really isn't enough. We're being asked to do more with less, really deal with changing expectations. And so now it's like, well, what do I do? Right. And so I think bringing that spirit of entrepreneurship into an organization. So the resiliency, you talk about wellness, that resiliency is really important, and kind of looking to yourself for that and not necessarily looking to your supervisors or colleagues. Having that everything is figure outable kind of mentality, really being a little scrappy and kind of figuring things out and using the scientific method we learned back in, 6th grade or whatever. And so it's that mindset and drive and resiliency of an entrepreneur that comes within an organization to really thrive in a way that I think is necessary now.
Yeah, absolutely. So resiliency is something that we've been talking a lot about around here, because what I've been noticing is when I've done my career coaching or even been consulting with my business clients, that is what they state that either their employees are lacking, like their rebound time from crisis is really long. Like they have a bad day and then they just sulk in it. And even the employees, they don't call it their own resiliency. They're just like, oh, well, this happened 6 months ago, and then this happened 3 months ago. And I kind of look at them like, do you not think there's going to be crisis and problems in the workplace? Like, and you're still mulling over something that happened that long ago? So that ability to kind of bounce back from challenges or uncomfortable conversations, how do you find is the best way to build up resiliency? Because it doesn't seem to be a born quality. I know I've got a little bit of it just from the school of hard knocks and a colorful childhood. But people who weren't given the opportunities to have that stretch, how do they have it if they've never had the opportunity to create it? How can we self-create it without going through crisis, I guess?
Yeah. So, I think there's a lot of ways, and, there's a lot of research happening right now around resiliency, and I won't pretend to be a scholar in all of that. But I think that we're going to just keep learning a lot about that. That being said, I think there's a few things. One is, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit, not looking to other people for validation.
Yes. Yes.
And I think, it seems two separate things, but I think they're really related, because when we go through tough times, we want that pat on the back. We want to be told we're okay. We want to be told, a lot of different things so that we can feel a certain way. But we can actually generate those feelings on our own. And I don't think anyone tells us that. I think we're told, you got to get the A. We go through school being told, you're going to be told what grades you're going to get. You're going to be told how well you're doing. But then when you go into the workforce, we look for those A's and those gold stars and the charts. They're not there. You really have to create it in yourself. And so I think it's that, seeing that validation, it goes to celebrating too, like celebrating your own successes, like being able to be proud of the little things that you figured out. And maybe you create your own little cohort of people that you work with or you don't work with, that you have lunch together and you're like, guess what I did today, and not waiting for your boss to see it, because your boss is busy.
Right.
And I think a lot of times they're waiting again for those trophies and gold stars that never come. And so then they're working from a place that's down here. And then when the next crisis comes, they're already low.
Right.
So it's building yourself up and finding tools through coaching, through other people to celebrate, to validate, and to really see that. I think the other thing is expectation. This is one thing. I mean, I had to learn this. I will never forget, I had a boss very early on at the association, and she was like, you need to fail. And I was like, what?
Right.
What are you talking about? Here I was, valedictorian, honor student, had already gotten promoted very young at this association. I was like, no, failure is not going to help me here. And I think what she didn't have the language, but I think what she was speaking to was that resiliency, and things had come very easy for me. And so then when I did get promoted and I had a difficult employee or I had these things, I'm like, I suck. Like, I don't know what to do because it's hard.
Right.
And that's what she was speaking to. So I think some of it too is the narrative that we provide our younger employees around failure, that it's okay, because I think they're afraid of it. And we need to let them know that it's okay, and show them that it's okay. Because I think there is some places where it's not.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that cover up culture, keep your mouth shut, don't talk to the cops, don't be a snitch, kind of thing. Like, why do we all have to act like everything's okay all of the time, and that there's not challenges or difficulties or failures or missteps or misjudgments? I always try to be pretty transparent with my team on, hey, listen, we're going to try this. I don't know if it's going to work, or I had a bad moment. I spoke out of frustration, asking for that, not just saying I'm sorry, but for asking for forgiveness when something happens. There's just such a big difference. And it's amazing to me How many people can't have that embarrassing follow-up conversation after something? Some of my best friendships have been spawned out of poor judgment on one party's behalf or the other, only because we recovered from it with dignity and respect. We're all going to mess up. The expectation of perfection is unrealistic, but it's how we come back from that, I think, that speaks towards our character.
Absolutely. And again, having those conversations, letting them see you in those ways creates a culture where it's okay to talk about it, and for them to come to you and be like, I was on a call with a client and this happened.
Right.
And I need to figure out how to come back from it.
Yeah.
And that expectation that it is going to be a roller coaster.
Yes.
I think, some of us think we get on a career train and like, no, it's like this, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you said that you got a coach and then you became a coach. And I see so many coaches in the marketplace, especially when there's a recession that seems to spawn them.
Yes.
And there's all kinds of jokes and memes about that. But how does someone, one, know that it's time to make that investment in themselves? And two, how do you choose the right coach? Because not all coaches are created equal, and not all, not that some are better or worse. I mean, they are, but some of them have different specialties. How do you know which one is the one for you?
Sure. And I think a lot of factors go into that. In terms of when it's time to have a coach, in some ways, I think if you have a human brain, you probably need a coach. Because we are all messy. That being said, for me, it was, there's a lot of wonderful mental health professionals, and I think there's a time and place for that. And if you need that, I think you should definitely lean into that direction. I don't think coaching is a replacement for
therapy. Yeah, absolutely.
100%. For me, I wasn't in a place where I was depressed or was having that. It was everyone around me was telling me I was doing great. And I'm like crying in the bathroom, feeling like I'm failing every day.
Right.
Like what, this is not, it felt hard, but in a new way. There just was this disconnect. It was a lot of imposter syndrome. So I don't think it needs to be that way. Again, I think sometimes we think when we get a new promotion, it's just going to be hard. And there is some grittiness, but also you don't have to be alone. So I don't think there's anything wrong. Just again, there was a lot of stigma for years around therapy, and I think that's gone away a lot. I think it's the same with coaching. I think that going the route of coaching can be helpful.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in terms of finding a coach, though, fortunately or unfortunately, the bar is very low. The threshold for entering the coaching industry is pretty low because it's not a regulated industry like therapy. And that can be helpful because you can find someone who's maybe in your niche. I've talked to some people who are like maybe in banking, and they're like, well, I want someone who can help me in banking. And that can be helpful. I think it's important to see and to kind of self-reflect. Do you really need someone that's specific to your industry? Right. Or do you need someone who's going to help you with those broader mindset leadership tools? Nothing wrong either direction. But it's a question to ask yourself, and that will help you narrow the large pool of coaches out there. Talk to other people. Talk to the coaches. I think if a coach is kind of hiding behind their website or their social media and requires you to pay in or something before even talking to, now I say that some people have programs where you're not going to be able to talk to the coach directly, but if you're looking for like a one-on-one or a more tailored approach, see if there's a consultation. Talk to a coach. Talk to your friends. Talk to people who have maybe, again, used that person, because everyone's different. I'm not going to be for everyone. Even through the coaching school that I went to, there are people who take those same tools and have a very different approach. Some people are more accountability or a little harsher. I tend to lead a little bit softer and then kind of come in with the like zingers every now and then. But you're going to find that person that speaks to you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's that's important, having that synergy and that rapport that's natural, you know, can be really nice. But then also hiring someone who has strengths where you've identified some weaknesses, whether that's industry knowledge or software expertise or
Yep.
organizational skills. I think a lot of entrepreneurial chaos comes out of the fact is, if you do some personality testing on entrepreneurs, they're usually very high vision, high creative, which has a tendency to tie itself to low organization, lower methodicalness, not quite the attention to detail. So then they find this frustration between having all these thoughts, ideas, and dreams and drive, but not having the ability to implement, process, and create kind of those systems. You kind of have a three-pronged approach in your organization. Can you go over why you chose those three pillars to stand on?
Sure. So the three pillars I look at are people, processes, and perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And again, whether you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have all three of those.
Right.
Kind of starting with perspective, again, we have brains. It's how we process the world. We need them. They're also not infallible. And
Right.
so having those mindset tools around how to see how you're creating the results you have.
Mm-hmm.
Again, sometimes we think something happens and that's why we feel a certain way.
Right.
They're making me feel this way. Okay, but what's happening in your brain? What are you making it mean
Right.
in between, those pieces? So
Yeah.
perspective is
A,
super
a lot
important.
of that comes from our childhood, those
Absolutely. How we're
perspectives.
how we're
And
brought up.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
that
Uh,
internal dialogue.
yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I say a lot of times it's not me in the back of my mind, it's my mom. Like,
Oh
can
dear.
hear her voice.
Right.
Don't get too big for your britches. So yeah, that perspective is really important and plays a role in the other pieces. Then you go to people. We'll jump to that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, regardless of what you do, you're dealing with people.
Oh yeah.
And so, maybe they're employees, maybe they're supervisors, maybe they're clients and customers, maybe they're coworkers, um, whatever that, maybe they're vendors,
Mm-hmm.
but understanding how to be clear. I love Brene Brown, clear is
Yes.
kind.
Yes.
And sometimes we convolute things because we're scared again of how it's going to be perceived and how that's going to make us feel. And
Mm-hmm.
so really getting that clarity. I talk a lot about difficult conversations,
Mm.
and kind of taking that difficult out of them. Delegating, whether it's delegating to someone else or delegating through automation, which goes to
Mm-hmm.
process, or
Mm-hmm.
delegating to our future selves. Again, there's all that people. I even talk about sales. And again, I talk about sales with my entrepreneurs and my intrapreneurs. We're always selling something,
Yeah.
whether we're
Negotiation is such a good skill set to have.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that you're applying for a new job and you're selling yourself or you're selling a new idea.
Mm-hmm.
Or so the third P, processes. So bringing strategy in and really having good processes to help you with your effectiveness and your capacity. Again, entrepreneur or intrapreneur, both of
Mm-hmm.
them really need to be looking at what's working, what's not, where do I need to sell someone on a new way of doing things, or maybe figure, we've always done it this way. Maybe there's a different way. So
Mm-hmm.
perspective, people, and processes are the three pillars because I think they touch pretty much everything we do,
Right.
regardless of your role.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Now, you mentioned your mom being kind of a part of your consciousness and that accountability in the back of your head. What do we need to know kind of about your childhood to understand who you are today?
Yeah, so, I think I had a pretty typical middle class childhood. I did have parents who really pushed me. It was one of those like, oh, you got an A minus, why is it a minus? Like
Oh,
why,
gracious.
so I was really, I was pushed a lot. I'm the older sister. I think there's
Okay.
probably a lot wrapped up in that
Of how many?
too. Of just two. There's just
Two.
two of us.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
And what's
and
your age gap?
6 years.
Okay. So that's
So
significant.
yeah, pretty significant. So we were never in the same school together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, And so, yeah, I grew up, went through high school. Like I think I mentioned, I was valedictorian, kind of really, again, kind of pushed to be kind of top of the game. But with all of that, I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Right.
My sister was very different. She, from the time she could talk, wanted to be a nurse. She's
Mm,
now a pediatric nurse practitioner. Like that never wavered.
right.
Whereas while I was excelling, it was kind of this jack of all trades
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And so I think I took that with me. I mentioned I didn't really climb a career ladder, even at the association. I went from the programmatic side to the association management membership side and
Hmm.
back again and back again. So I think, that kind of scrappiness and also kind of pursuit of excellence has really stayed with me.
That's fantastic. And what is your relationship like now with your sister? You said that you were kind of different in some ways.
We are very different, but
Yeah.
also, we get along really well. So the age gap, I think, kept us from being super close when we were little. I mean, I was a teenager and she was still in elementary school. And
Right.
um, when I went to college, things really changed. I kind of became more of a mother figure. Our parents split up at that point, which is a little different. We were a little bit older when that happened. And
Right.
really, ever since then, we've been super close. And as she kind of went through college, and then funny enough, as she was one of the ones that really encouraged me on the coaching side.
Oh,
She was like, you kind of do that for me all the time. She was like, it's nice that you have some like tools to like tell me
right.
about it, not just
Right.
theory. So yeah, we're definitely really close now. She unfortunately doesn't live close to me anymore, which is
Hmm.
tough.
Hmm.
But we have these great careers that are really different, and I think that helps sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. My sister and I couldn't be more different. We have a 8 year age gap, and we were raised in a single family home though. So I did kind of take that parent type role with her in the rearing of her and whatnot. And so we weren't very sisterly in that way. There was always that divide. I was always an authority figure just because of the dynamics of our household and the struggles that our mom was going through. But now to have like a real sister, to have a best friend that you can kind of talk to about anything. But we're different politically, we are different in business, we are different in our parenting style. But then I think for me, it's and her, honestly, because all of our friends are like, I don't know how you can deal with someone who's so and be so close. And I'm like, because that's what love is. Love
Mhm.
isn't a political view. Love isn't right or wrong. Love isn't how many hours a week do you work or how do you serve the world and show up. Love is just a kinship in being there, whether you agree with someone
Mhm.
in their decisions that they're making, or not. So I
Yeah.
think the world could probably use a little bit more of just that unconditional type of love for one another without this judgment. We're so polarized, more polarized than we've ever been, which is so weird because we're so much more connected and we have access to information like we never have before. I mean, to tell our grandparents now what we can do inside of just one of these little things is remarkable. They were
Oh yeah.
excited about fax machines.
I know.
So
Crazy.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, given your career path up to this point in being a coach, how do you now dream about what your future is? Because you're very mid-level career. You've only just started. How do you see yourself finishing well?
Yeah, I'm kind of trying to hold it with an open hand in some
Yeah.
ways. Even
Right.
when, I started this business 2.5 years ago, I kind of
Mhm.
had an idea what it was going to look like, and it's taken a lot of different paths. I didn't think, never really thought about speaking,
Right.
speaking engagements. And
Yeah.
that's been a huge part of what I do.
Yeah.
And I love it so much. And
What do you
so
speak on?
a couple different things, I'll speak on intrapreneurship, and kind of what that looks like and how you can cultivate that in yourself. Sometimes it's more motivation, depending on what people want. So I've talked about kind of owning your own career. And like, I
Mm,
think sometimes we think we need to climb this ladder when it's okay to bounce
right,
around and take those skills, transferable skills with you.
right.
I'm actually speaking on difficult conversations in
Yeah,
February, and
yeah,
so a lot of all related to that kind of owning your path, owning
hmm
your results,
hmm
in more micro and macro ways. So yeah, that being said, continuing to serve people. Um, I didn't have, I just started the group program this year. That was something that as I talked to one-on-one clients and talked to HR managers, it was like, hey, we want something that we can put people through and you kind of stay with them for a
right,
while.
right,
And so, continuing to evolve to the marketplace and see what they need while also touting this, I think entrepreneurship is really going to be a big part of what I do because it is
yeah,
a little different.
yeah,
It's a slightly different approach, but I think it's really important um, to, again, employees and employers for the
right,
future.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that our Gen Z is kind of getting that a little bit, kind of taking back that ownership. And I think they're a little tired of hearing all the finger pointing and whatnot. I'm really excited about this upcoming generation, Gen Z, and then I think Alpha is right behind. I don't know how we got all the way to Z and now we're back to A. I don't know what happened to QRS, or whatever. I don't know who names those things, who's in charge of that. But I love the fact that you hold it with an open hand. I think the older that I get, the more I realize I'm not really in charge of anything. I just came from a meeting with the Christian Chamber of Commerce, and one of the leaders was mentioning an exercise they had done with their coach where they were asked to write their obituary. And he said that it was really shifting for him because he felt like as a businessman, he had all these accomplishments, but
Mhm.
none of those accomplishments would he ever list in his obituary. And so I was like, ooh, so, I probably like mentally clocked out for the next 15 minutes of our 2-hour meeting because I was like, man, like what would I write? And so I've self-assigned that, to myself and taken that on as a challenge that I want to try to complete for the month of February, is sit down and actually write my obituary and then share that with some of my inner circle, right? The people that are kind of closest to me, and say, what am I missing? What would you say if you were writing my obituary? What would you say about me? So I think it's going to be a fun exercise to really boil it down to what
Mhm.
matters,
Well, and I think it makes you look too at the bigger theme.
Right.
So it doesn't matter that you had a podcast or that you wrote a book,
Right.
but what were
The
those
things that
bigger
keep
themes,
us
that
up
you,
at night is nothing that we're going to want to be remembered by.
yeah, but it's those like, but why did you do the podcast? You did the
Right.
podcast to bring people together and to
Mm-hmm.
invoke transparency and make people feel not alone. Like that
Right.
might be in your obituary,
Right.
like, and so I think that's, one of my big things, again, kind of the themes that I see it, these people that come to me that lack confidence and
Mm-hmm.
lack capacity, but it's in there. It's just a matter of like giving them the tools to let it out. I think that's like, maybe my bigger theme is this like equipping people with confidence and capacity.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I'm going to do it. It might not
Right.
be through coaching 10 years from now. It
Yeah.
might be a whole nother modality, but I think that core will stay. But I think that's an awesome exercise. Really,
Yes.
it does make your brain hurt a little bit
It
in a
does.
good
It
way.
does. Because it can't be long either. I mean, how long is an obituary? I mean,
Right.
certainly less than 500 words if you're lucky.
Yeah.
I do wish they would add to obituaries the cause of death, but maybe that's just because I'm a morbid weirdo.
I don't know. I always
I'm like,
wonder.
who do I have to call to find out? Like the paranoid person inside of me is like, I just want to know how people die so I can not do that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, how do you balance? It sounds like you're someone who pours into a lot of different people, and that can be exhausting. I once shared with my husband after a really bad day. He's like, well, why are you so drained? What happened? What went wrong today? I said, nothing went wrong. Just no one ever comes to me and says, so Dawn, how are you today? What can I do for you? They go, I need a job. My employees suck. Make them do better. I got fired, or just like no one ever like kind of does that check in on us. What do you do for your self-care to make sure that you're not depleting yourself as you're pouring into others?
So one of the things, and this has been something over the last year that I really put some boundaries around, is my work schedule.
Yes.
Um, and
Preach.
work schedule, and also work within the schedule. So like I do coaching on certain days, and then
Right.
there's certain days I don't coach. I only do admin work, content creation,
Mm-hmm.
networking, like those things.
Mm-hmm.
That has been huge because, I talk about like the ebbs and flows of expectation. That kind of helps me with the ebbs and flows of my week. I love coaching, but I get what you're saying. It can be easy to take that on.
Right.
And when I'm doing that every day, it's
Yeah.
like, oh my goodness. So
Yeah.
now when I have, I do coaching on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and not on Thursday, Friday, like it really helps,
Mm-hmm.
balance the week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've also leaned into friendships more,
People with good
old
friendships that
friendships.
are live longer.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know
I
if you've
can't
seen
believe
the
that. That
blue
was
zones, the whole
right.
blue zone thing, these people that live over 100, like the
Centurions.
connections. And
Yeah.
so I don't have a ton of friends, but I have really great ones. We go for walks.
Right.
We do things that are not, that very much not work, or very much not what we would do with our families, even
Right.
sometimes,
Right.
like it's a very different relationship. And I think that varied approach
Mm-hmm.
has really like fed me in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Last year was crazy. We actually built a house in the midst of all of the other things. And so now that we're settling in, we actually have a farm. And so
Mm.
letting, it's a theme, right? Like letting my week have different pieces, letting my relationships fill different needs,
Right.
letting myself go outside and like be the farmer for a little bit and then coming
Yes,
back and
girl.
being the CEO. Like,
Love touching me some earth. There's nothing more grounding than just being
yes,
in nature.
I think when they become at least for me, when
Mm-hmm.
there's that monotony,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I start to feel depleted because
Yes.
I'm like, because usually the monotony is like up here.
Right.
And
The
so
grind,
having
right?
that variedness
Yeah.
has really helped me recharge in the
Yes.
midst.
Yes. I think for me, controlling my days and my hours in, no longer working like a true full-time schedule has been a big thing. I have been surrounded by a lot of entrepreneurs a lot of my life that took pride in the grind and how
Mm-hmm.
hard they worked. It was like this badge of honor. Like I did my 60 this week, my 12-hour days. And I started to slip into that. And then I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. This does not I don't want to be defined by my work. So when I did start my own company, I kind of relooked at what my priorities were and what I needed to make as income. Because what I found a lot when career coaching is people like, well, I have to have this job that pays this much money. And I'm like, well, why do you need that much money? And they're like, because that's what I need to pay my bills. I'm like, then change the way you live your life
Mm-hmm.
because you're not happy. You just said you were miserable. You hate the work that you do. You're tired of the industry. You feel burnout, but you want that car. You want that house. You want that status. And at what cost? Like,
Right.
what are you doing? My sister is wonderful at being able to pace herself through this life. And for the longest time, I thought she was insane. I'm like, what do you mean you don't work full time? I would be stressed out if I was as poor as
Mm-hmm.
you are. And she's like, well, I ain't stressed out at all. I'm doing yoga in the park at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I guess you're right. So watching her really invite that part-time work lifestyle and sacrifice some of the trinkets, because at the end of the day, that's all they are, is trinkets. and really have a lived experience of what this life is has been good for me. So I love that you kind of plan your days. I kind of cut my days short. I'm like a 7 to 2 kind of gal,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm done. I have never in my life dropped off my children to school and picked up my children after school and been that kind of mom. I was in that grind world in their earlier years, and it's one of my probably my things that I would change if I could go back and kind of reevaluate what I valued. But having grown up so poor and in such chaos, I was scratching my way out of dependency, out of poverty, out of humiliation, out of a sense of worthiness. And so, through my 30s, I did the whole, 20s and early 30s, I did the whole grind. And then you lose some people, you go through some stuff, and you go, I've got friends that are dropping dead at work. They were working so hard for their retirement that they'll never ever see. So I love that you are able to get your farm time in and slow your life down and live life with the kind of the ebbs and flows. I recently saw a calendar that was the whole year calendar on one big page, and you stick it on your wall. It's laminated.
Okay. Yep.
And so you say, what do I want my year to look like?
Yeah.
And so my husband and I, we decided we want 40 nights out in the wilderness or someone away from home. We love our home, but we want to live a life outside of these four walls. And so sitting down and like, okay, planning out the quarter, planning the fun, and then figuring out how the work will make the fun kind of happen. And so glancing at the whole year on one big thing and seeing the balance of it all, I think is really cool. I think I'm going to get one for my office.
Love that.
Yeah. And it has the weekdays in there and then the weekends and, that kind of thing. So I love that.
Well, and I think it's being able to see what's possible too. I think at least for me growing up, it was you were either a stay-at-home mom or you were a career woman that worked all the time.
Yeah.
And, several years ago, one of my girlfriends and I were walking and we're talking about it. We're like, what if we can work the hours we want, drop our kids off, pick them up, go to school parties, help out at the PTO if we want, have time with our husbands, do fun, go for walks together.
Right.
And be career women. And have professional jobs. It was like, well, you all went to college, so you're going to throw that away to be stay-at-home moms. And again, not that there's anything wrong with being a stay-at-home mom, but I didn't quite want either. I wanted somewhere in the middle. And now we are creating that. We're now showing the next generation that there's so much more possibility.
Well, there is no clock, right? We were raised in this American way of like you clock in and you clock out and you do this and you do your 40 and you get your pension and your retirement. But there is no clock. There is only production. There is only creation. There is only productivity and contribution. So stop looking at what hours that you worked and look at what you produce and then what value that brings. I think, being paid by the hour is the simplest thing that we can do, but it doesn't generate greatness or excellence. I call it butts and seats. We're paying for butts and seats, and then they're on their phone and they're just burning time and don't pay for impact. Yes, as a business owner, you're going to have to sit down and God forbid actually know what things cost you, what the value is, what the hidden, areas of productivity are, what technology tools will, yes, it's harder, but there's a corporate burden for those that employ others to create excellence out of what you're doing, and not just the monotony of, okay, I've bought you for this many hours, do what I tell you to do. Leading someone towards the greatness, getting them to be at a point of where they have higher resiliency. They're able to fail in a safe place where you're not punished when something doesn't go excellent. So, I love that you were able to find that balance between you and your girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's going to be a cry for that.
Yes.
Again, as you build up intrapreneurs or even just this younger generation, they're going to
Mm-hmm.
want what
Mm-hmm.
you're saying. They're
Yeah.
going to want to be paid for their impact and not,
For their
well,
time.
this is what you
Yeah.
want me to do, and I can do it in 25 hours a week.
Yeah. Gig work was really, it peaked in COVID. And then I think some people that don't have processes, that don't have self-control, that don't have some entrepreneurial insight, it was easy money and it was quick money, but then they're like, oh wait, taxes, 1099 W. Oh, I actually have to go in and do all these things. But I do think that a gig economy is going to be more of the future, because we're in a global economy now. We're no longer confined by, as business owners, who lives in our geographic area to employ. Now I can employ in the Philippines or in Central America or from Canada, and bringing all that talent and diversity in, really just has no limit the way that it used to have a limit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always like to ask my guests one thing at the end of our podcast, and that is, what is one piece of advice that you would tell 18-year-old Becky that would just make her life a little easier, a little richer, just save you some grief?
Yeah, I think, and I alluded to this earlier, it's okay if it's hard.
Right.
Again, I think we were, I think back to the days, and you probably did this too, where it's like, how many multiplication can you get done in a minute or whatever?
Right.
Like,
yeah,
it was be fast, be quick, make it easy. And there were times throughout my career where that wasn't the best.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't matter that it was done the quickest. It needed to be, and it wasn't that it was incorrect, but I could have done so much better if I
Right.
had
It's the
taken
process,
time.
not the destination.
And again, how many times I thought that I wasn't equipped or wasn't good enough because it was hard. Like, I made it being hard mean so many other things. And so if I could go back and just, it's okay that it's hard.
Embrace the
You
challenge.
can still do it.
Yeah. I love that. Great advice. Great advice. There's nothing wrong with struggle.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Becky, for joining us today. If you want to connect with Becky, all of her contact information will be down in the link. If you feel like she spoke into your life and was bringing something of value that she could help you level up on, either internally or externally, just give her a call. Thanks,
Absolutely.
everybody.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mm-hmm. Thanks again for spending time with us today. If you want more HR stories and resources, go to simplythebest.com to join our newsletter. That's SIPLEY. Until next time, stay happy.